We're recording.
There we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Grant Cameron, and we have a old guest with a new subject. I'm joined by my assistant, Nicole Sakich from Illinois, and we are going to talk about a book that we have co-authored. We've kept it kind of secret, but we've done a book, and Nicole will tell me the name of it because it's a weird name, and I can't remember the name of the book. But it's on triangles. So good evening, Nicole, and thank you for joining me. And let's talk about this book that we're releasing, and we're going to make our $1 million on this book. And it's about triangles. How did this start, and what's the name of the book?
Hi, Grant. I'm doing well tonight. The
Is this your
title
first
of
book?
the book, it is. This is funny because neither of us knew what the final title was, but it's Triangles, Aliens, and Messages. And I guess how this started for all of us was earlier or late last year, we had all these triangles in the news, in ufology news, and our buddy Bob McGuire had seen one of these pictures. So we decided to bring in everybody who has had a triangle sighting and just hear their story and see what they thought about it. And how many people did we end up talking to? It was over 2 panels. So
yeah, I think we did 3. We did, but first we have to clarify that I think it was your idea with the triangles, and it was Bob that started the whole thing. Maybe talk a little bit about the controversy that happened with Bob's interview, where you said, Bob had seen this classified photo that was in the, or not the classified photo, but it was in the classified channels. He had seen it. Mm-hmm. And then I said to you, can you get him on? Yeah. So we called him on, and tell people what happened with that. I think that's was sort of the.
It was we did a series just called Gossip and Rumors, or Rumors and Gossip, where it was stuff everybody was talking about in the community, but nobody, really knew where it was coming from. And one of those things was the article that the Debrief and Tim McMillan was putting out. So we were kind of whispering about that, saying we're hearing that this big article is about to drop, and it was going to be about triangles. And that's when Bob chimed in, and he's like, yeah, I've seen it. I've seen the picture. And then, but by morning, just that little blurb, like, I think McMillan he's like 9 hours behind us or something, and across the pond. He woke up to like this Twitter frenzy, didn't really watch, and it was just explosive. Like it was my first Twitter war.
Well, we sort of scooped them, but the thing was, they were dragging they were handing it out. They're playing their little game, trying to hype the story. We got this big story, and we got this exclusive. Where'd you get it from? We can't tell you. And they were throwing it out there. And then Bob talked about it, and suddenly we had the story, and they still hadn't released it. So
we're not even sure, I think, if the photo we were actually talking about was actually released by the Brief, because it didn't quite match up, and that was more controversy. But everybody made up. Everybody had a big hug out with it. Nobody was mad at each other. Nobody scooped anybody. So that's what's funny, months and months later, I think people still think there's like a battle or a war, but
yeah. And then I think it was your idea as well to do triangles,
it was one of those things that it was like everywhere you turned, it's like somebody else had a triangle story, and people started telling us, oh, you guys need to talk to so-and-so or so-and-so. And then that's when we started making our lists. And you're the one that noticed we had quite a few people involved in like the media or journalists, like on these panels. So that was an interesting
big time. That was the three of the major UFO reporters was Stephen Greenstreet from the New York Post, that he had a giant triangle sighting. Billy Cox, who wrote the blog for many years in Florida, used to work for USA Today. He had a giant triangle sighting in the 1979 or something like that. It was many, many years ago. And then Lee Spiegel, who wrote for Huffington Post for years, and he had a giant triangle sighting, and he was brought in by Marler. So people might think we were copying Marler, but we weren't copying Marler. We talked
to Marler as well.
We brought Marler onto the panel, and he thought it was a good idea. but we just had all these bizarre
Big
things. And
Cat with Spaced Out Radio, and his
yeah,
meet.
and Dave from Spaced Out Radio had triangle sighting. And I
Right.
think with the one with like a lot of them we didn't even know, like Lee Spiegel, it
Mhm.
was actually, I think, Joe Bookman that brought him in. I think
Yeah.
somebody brought him in and said, "Have you heard they're doing this triangle panel?" And so I didn't even know that Spiegel had a giant triangle sighting in North Carolina. And
Right.
these were really, really bizarre sightings that they had, where they
Yeah.
would tell it, and they all seemed to go on the panel. I don't know if we really got turned down by anybody. I think everybody sort of joined in. Marler was there, and Stevens Green
I
Street. I
don't
was
think
kind of surprised.
anybody turned us down. No, I think maybe, in fact, we didn't even get to everybody that we wanted to. It's like at some point we just had to cut it off. And I know now I've brought up a couple times, I'm like, well, that could be book two. Like that could be
Yeah,
we maybe, I mean, you it drives me crazy. Authors release stuff and then it's like there's like an amendment to it like 2 months later, and you're like,
yeah.
ooey, I got the original like that. So I don't want to do anything like that. It's just there's so much I think that's still unexplored still. And Marler was interesting because he was like the go-to, and we hate using the word expert in this
Yeah.
field, but he was the go-to. He wrote a excellent book on it. And everybody told us you have to talk to Marler. And he's the one that filled us in that in everybody or every case that he's come across, there's never been a landing.
A landing. I was really surprised by that. Yeah, I was really, wow. I was like,
Well, and it's almost like he really covered cases and nuts and bolts in his book. And I think we took that person approach of talking to the people who experienced it and hearing it firsthand from them. And maybe we didn't have any landings, but the way they would describe that, like raise and turn and tilt, it almost makes me want to say maybe we're seeing takeoffs though, instead of landings. Like, and then the few stories that we had where the smaller triangle would meet the bigger triangle and they would go off together. So floors my mind. It
yeah,
does.
yeah. You had the one. Talk about the one with Illinois, because
Oh
you
yeah.
gathered that
Oh,
one. I think the only just to, before I forget, the only one I think the only one we missed was the Belgian. The expert on the Belgian, somehow
that's
the time
right.
got mixed up and he didn't show up on the panel. But he had agreed to come on the panel. So the
Yeah,
Belgian was the only one that we really didn't talk about. But we had all the big ones, like we had Phoenix
right.
Lights, we had the
Well,
Hudson
we did have
Valley ones.
we did have a few people from the UK as well. So I mean, not necessarily that Belgium wave, but some across the UK. Then we had oh, the Hudson Valley talk. And what was her name? Because it's great. I was like, this lady is a female Grant Cameron. I
Yeah,
love it.
all the books that she had written and stuff. Zimmerman.
Yes, Zimmerman. And
Yeah,
then of course we did Phoenix Lights and talked with Dr. Lynn Katai. And
yeah,
that was just, there was so much about that case that I didn't know. So that was great. But back to the Illinois, of course, nobody I think has declared or really given it a name. I hear it called the Southern Illinois Triangle sightings. I hear it called the Highland incident, but it was in central Illinois. And it was fascinating because it was like 4 or 5 little small towns, all reported by police officers with radio chatter going back and forth, witnessing this slow moving, sometimes appearing as a triangle, sometimes appearing as a rectangle. But it's just a fascinating case. It's never truly been explained. Aside from police officers reporting seeing this, there was also eyewitnesses, like farmers in the area that were up early, like pre-dawn, like seeing this thing move past their farms. And what do you do when you see something like that? You do call your neighbor, in small areas like this. You're like, get outside and see this. So it was a scenario like that. And Tinley Park, I believe, here in Illinois was also a triangle. And our researcher pal, Sam Moranto, kind of covered that so extensively, and it was good. And it was another multi-witness case here in Illinois. And you brought it up. I sent the article to our discussion group today. It's like Illinois sightings that can't be explained. It's like they're still making headlines, like right in the middle of the country.
Yeah. And I did you realize there was that many sightings? That I was kind of shocked how many there was, because I'd never really thought about triangle sightings. I knew Marl had written the book. That was going over many years, but when I started, I realized I had my own sighting in '76, and I'm going, holy cow. And then the small ones where we had, and I don't know if we really dealt with that in the book, but in the one I had, and it didn't occur to me till we did the book, was that I had this one in, I guess it was about the late spring of 1976, where this triangle sat above the car, and it had these huge lights on it. And I assumed it was one object with these two red lights in the front and a green light in the back. And what all the people described was flying backwards. So the flat end was flying towards you. And then we had the ones on the ground where the thing would sit on the ground and it would be all flared up. We'd flash lights at it, would flare up, and then it would go down. It would turn into a triangle. And I didn't remember this till after we wrote the book. It would be in this triangle. And then when you'd flash a light at it, you'd look at it with binoculars, and the top of the triangle, so it'd be like a triangle like this. The top would start to flare. It would get bigger, touch the second part of the triangle, moving the third triangle, and it would flare up. And then it would go back to this triangle every time. Once it flared down, it would be these three lights you could only see with binoculars, very, very faint triangle. And so I suddenly realized after we did this that there was this significant thing with triangles. It's got something to do with something. And we had this conversation about, now the guy's name's going to escape me. He's a savant. He's the guy who got beat up in a bar. As soon as he got beat up in a bar, he had a head injury, and he could see everything in terms of mathematics. So he could see when he sees pi, he can draw pi, and it has all this stuff. And he's the one that came up with the fact that everything is made out of triangles, and even circles are made out of triangles. And that's why in pi, you can't get it to go. It always keeps repeating itself because the triangle always comes to the corner of the circle, and there's always going to be a little space because the triangle doesn't cover it. And you can break it down, and it'll just keep going, and it gets closer to the edge, but you never get to the edge. And it wasn't until I realized this may be something very significant about reality, that triangle is a very important part of what might be going on here. And because we had the thing where we talk in there and we show some of the photos of people with the triangles on the wrists. And so the question would be, why would an alien or whoever it is put a triangle on somebody's wrist? Like, what is that, a propulsion symbol? Or like it doesn't make any sense why they're putting triangles on people's. And we have lots of cases of people with triangles on their bodies that they have these symbols when they come off the craft.
It's great. I know. And I've had a few people ask me if the triangles are like, oh, is that just a classic abduction mark? Well, what's your thought on that? Like, I can't say it's necessarily a classic abduction mark, because you see so many that are like four, or just like the scoop marks, or different things. But
I would say it's the number one symbol that's put on people. But it's the weird part about, why would you put it on somebody's wrist? Like, why would you do this?
Why on the left side more often than not?
Yeah. And just this bizarre, like the one we show, there's a woman by the name of Karen who actually helped edit the book here in Winnipeg. And you see the triangle that she had. I mean, it's absolutely clear as day. And it's like just really bizarre. I remember the night when she sent them to a friend of mine, we were actually trying to photograph orbs in a yard in the city. And I saw these triangle marks. Oh, wow. And it's kind of weird where it's that trickster phenomena, or what I call the theory of wow, is it makes you go like, why have I got a triangle on my wrist? And because what you'll do is you'll come off and say, oh, that was just a dream. I just imagined that. And then you look at your wrist. That's why I think they put it on there. Is you look at your wrist and you go, oh no, that wasn't a dream. That actually happened. And I think that's why they put it on there, is to make you really think what the heck is going on. Because lots of people have had these. We did Mike Cleland with the triangle he had as a young kid, and he talks about the triangle mark on his wrist, and he did a whole article. I think he said it was the biggest article he ever did, was the triangle. And people,
We did a solo interview with Mike. We didn't include him in on our triangle panels, but I think
yeah,
she did share that story with us in our full interview with him. So that was exciting. I've been following him since, and he's still hooting with the owls. So that's great. He's like,
yeah. And that would be the other thing. It's like
yeah.
symbolic thing where the owl is a symbol, the triangle is a symbol, the deer, you get all these different, images that they're using. And that's what Jim Semivan, we're going to talk about that in an interview we're going to do in a couple minutes. That's what Jim Semivan said, according to Ryan Bledsoe. They're ultra terrestrials. They created us and they talk in symbols. And so the triangle would be a symbol. But I was really fascinated. It didn't take long because we used a lot of the transcripts of the panels because the panels were really good. They went on for a couple hours. I know we had 4 hours of panels on triangles with all these people, and they all told their story, and they all had photographs, and a lot of them. Remember the guy from North Dakota had actually built a model of his triangle, and so did the guy in England. He was telling me.
Our UK. That was one of our UKs, I think, that had the model.
Yeah, well, the guy from North Dakota had it as well. The guy that was
that's right. We had a couple.
Yeah, he had it. So that's the thing is you have two people who actually made models out of their craft they saw. And so that is another little weird aspect. The guy in England was selling them, and he had the pattern that was on the bottom of the craft. That these
and he said it was kind of like an obsession. Like he knew he had to make it. It's like he couldn't stop until it was right. That's one thing I liked too. It's like some of us get like these drives to get, it's like everybody else ends here at the rabbit hole, and then some very few just continue to plunge, and he had to until that model was done. That was really cool because there was the smaller version of it, but then the big monster one, and it's like everybody wanted one. They're like, where can we get one?
Yeah. He's had a good little business going there. He was selling models all over the place. So a question for you is, like Marler says, these things have been around all along, and it would be like, Grays. You may be able to find a case or two, but I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think that this triangle thing is sort of picked up. That this is something that I don't remember before my triangle sighting in '76. I don't remember any. Most people would be talking about flying saucers. And then suddenly you get these triangles. Do you think that this is part of them just changing the scene or changing? And the other thing is the bizarre thing about triangles is the number of people. The England guy described it. Lynn Katai described it. Is triangles that are a couple miles wide.
Yeah.
And so people would say, "Oh, this is government," and it's like, well, why would the government or an alien need a craft that's 2 miles across? And why would you fly it a couple hundred feet off the ground? So people are describing this fact that the thing was, it covered the entire sky from one side of the yard to the other. It was that big. And that was the bizarre thing.
Lights. I don't think people can really gauge the perspective well from the short video clips that we see. But when you hear it described, when Lynn and even, who is the Senator Fife or Governor Fife, when they're talking about being away and watching this massive thing move through this, basin or valley, whatever they call it, it's just, I don't know, kid. I was floored the first time I saw a cruise ship, and like the biggest cruise ship on our planet could hold my entire town and the crew of the ship. So like, to see a cruise ship of that scale, but then to imagine it in the sky, and then these triangles are bigger than that, and that's
yeah. And
wow.
that almost goes to the theory of wow, is like they want you to go like, what the hell? Yeah. Like it's just bizarre. And
I think what I've still been digging on, and the latest version of Cheryl and Linda's book wasn't out when we were doing these. Their first desk reference was out, and you just asked if I thought triangles were more. I don't know if they're more, but I do think they're in that, like, I think she calls it like an exotic group. And it's like there's even others that appear before these exotic ones do. So it's like, and I know I'm not quoting her work right or anything. That's I loaned my book out already, of course. So it's like I got it. I was like, this is great, borrow it, give it back. But I know that there are certain crafts that appear and it's almost predictive. It's like if you start seeing orbs or if you start seeing the discs, then it's like the next one is the triangles or those weird diamond ones or the egg-shaped ones, I think are exotic. So I know that I feel the triangle is in that category. And it's like you've said, it's like there's something about the triangle being the shape that it is, and its ties to the trifecta or three. Like, why is that important? And I think it's something that still needs flushed out, but it's definitely I mean, those roots run deep. We tried to have a discussion about sacred geometry in three, and I think we had to can it for a little while just because the topic is so big. We really have to like refocus on where we want to try to go with that, I think. But and the mystery is there. Like you brought up like what we want to talk about next in this segment. Is the big Tom DeLonge, Jim Semivan on Dr. Keating's podcast.
Yeah.
And I think DeLonge and Semivan talked about this relationship of three and ufology and the trifecta going back through religious history and humanities history. Like there's something there. I think he referred to it as, the Godhead or just the trifecta, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So there's links, it's one of these things where I know all of us smile to each other and we're like, it's all connected.
Well, we'll see what happens. Maybe we'll get a number of comments and we'll do another book or another panel and with new witnesses that come up because it's and the one other thing, let me ask you another question. I mean, I think we did Melinda Leslie, who said she was on a triangle. But other than that, there's the other thing that Lynn Katai brought up was there was 10,000 people saw Phoenix Lights or whatever it was, and there was no abduction cases. And except for Melinda talking about that one, which was a triangle, but it was sort of like a pyramid type thing rather than a triangle.
Right. And
there was really no abduction scenarios with the triangles that I relate. Is that what you got the impression?
We did have variations, like Melinda's was more of this pyramid one, and that was somebody else who had to pass. They were busy. We wanted to speak with Jim Peniston about his craft unknown origin, which has been described as a triangle, but over the years he's really flushed it out that it did kind of have like this dorsal on top to where not really a pyramid, but it's not really just a triangle. But that was another thing we came across. There was like the triangle full craft, and then there was the boomerang, and then there were these diamond shaped ones, or pyramid shaped ones. And so even to know that there's different classes of triangles, I guess is how you would say, but I don't know, something about chevrons.
Yeah, but we really didn't get too much into the speculating. We just basically had these people with these stories. I was just surprised how many of them, and we basically used the transcripts from the panel to get their story straight. So they're just basically telling the story like Lee Spiegel, who I didn't know had this dramatic thing where J. Allen Hynek had actually sent him to investigate this thing, and suddenly he's looking, the police officer and him are standing there looking at this thing. And to have that kind of story put on the record.
Draw my gun. He was like, I was scared at first, right? Like I think that might have been that story he was telling. And it is dramatic. I think almost everybody, was so taken aback by, what they were seeing. And I think we could definitely build on it. I know we were just contacted by so many people afterwards, even after viewing it, that I think I even said, oh, we'll have to do another one. There's just too many people still to talk to. But I think one area people kept trying to push us into was is this a human made TRB triangle, and we just didn't even really, I think somebody even sent us the patents, like, look this up, this is the patents. And it's like, okay, all right, but we're not going down that path. We were, like you said, we wanted to talk to the people who have witnessed these things and hear what they had to say. So we didn't really want to focus on what is that actual craft made out of and that sort of thing. So
Yeah, because I would have my own opinion that I kind of doubt that anybody would finance a craft that's 2 miles across. Like, why would you build something like that?
there wasn't like USAF or US Space
Yeah.
Force written down it. There wasn't. And now it's like, I think when people, I envision building the Death Star from like Star Wars. You know what I mean? When they go in those scenes and that thing's the size of the moon, and they're building it. It's like,
Yeah.
That's what it would take. I mean, what's the biggest dam in the world? It's like you could see it being built from space. So, I mean, do we really think somebody's building this kind of craft and nobody's gonna know it? I mean, think about that workforce. Like, that's amazing.
Or what you're going to do with it. That to me is the big thing. Like, what do you do with a craft that's that big? Because I know George Knapp was interviewing the guy from Area 51 that was building all the top secret stuff there. And he said basically what they're building at Area 51 now is very slow drone stuff, because that's what you need. We don't need crafts that are 2 miles wide. We need these drones that can go like little insects and spy on people and drop. And you don't need pilots and stuff like that. It just doesn't make any sense why you would build something. It doesn't have any practical purpose in terms of warfare or whatever. If you're going to go to another star system,
where do you land it? I was talking about those cruise ships. There's only 2 of them, or maybe 3 of these giant monster cruise ships and the sister ships. I think there's only like 4 ports in the entire world where they can even port. So what would you do with a stadium sized triangle? Like,
yeah. And you'd be able to maybe land it at a certain place, but would you fly it 100 feet over the ground in Phoenix, Arizona to test it? None of that stuff makes sense. So
no, it doesn't. And well, and Ross Coulter brought up recently in the news, like maybe when these triangles started appearing and they had to make it secret, maybe that's when they started showing up in Australia, a nice allied country with wide open desert space where nobody's at. But I don't know. That doesn't sit right with me either, because the sightings never stopped. If it was just our secret stuff and it was exposed and it went underground, why did we still continue to see things? So,
yeah. Okay, so let's a couple more questions. We'll wrap it up. So what is your mother? What do your friends think about you being an author now? Has life changed?
It's another day in the life of my life. I laughed and I told my boss at work, I said, okay, so when in a couple weeks when I make my first mill and Oprah calls me, join her book club. And I'm just telling you now that I might have to put in my notice at work. And then I think it was just yesterday, I walked into work and he's like, Oprah call yet? And I was like, nope, not yet. I told her people to talk to my people, But no, like there's just no anticipation of it at all. My mom was like, congratulations, but didn't ask the title, didn't ask, the name of it, what it was on. Like, I think sometimes they don't ask on purpose because then they know I'll just go on and it'll go over their heads, or they'll have to worry or something. I don't know, but
you never know, because we haven't released the first sort of advertisement. We haven't really published it. I haven't really posted on it. So
like you said, we just kind of snuck it out. I tweeted it. I tweeted it.
There you go. Well, we'll start publicizing it with this, and then you've got some copies coming, and you could put one at the front of the restaurant there as people are signing in, and everybody will look at the book and say, "What's that?" And Oh,
They'll
one of the
just be
people here
like,
wrote
"You forgot that book. Forgot
it.
that book in the restaurant."
You may get some sightings out of it in terms of people that have had sightings of triangles, because we probably will get some. I'll let you handle the stuff, and maybe we can do something else. Is there any other books you might want to do? We
Um,
do we do some panels on different
I,
stuff, but I mean,
I've already started compiling my notes. I think we really hit home on our out of body experience discussion that we did. So I would like to do maybe something on that. And that's what I've been. And then of course, I know you already like touched on music in your book on inspiration, but I think a whole book could really be devoted to artists in this, in
yeah,
ufology. Like
yeah,
it's
we did a lot of artists. That's right. I mean, we did do, and
well,
there's a
and
connection.
I speaking of that, I still have people on that list that I want to talk to. I never finished the series, kind of. I wanted to keep it ongoing because we were coming across so many interesting people that it's just really I I'm fascinated by it as well. So I
Well,
still
maybe
have
that's
my
what you can
feelers out
do.
there. There's still some people I want to get in contact with, and I've been figuring out ways to contact them. I mean, we're talking about like rock stars and pop stars and stuff. So I mean, you can't just like Facebook these people. And not a lot. I mean, I've had to work to try to get some contacts to make sure I'm even contacting real people, and not some like poser troll or something.
Yeah,
So it's been fun. I have people helping me. So
good.
find
When you
out.
get with the thing with the thing is for you to get the a painting or something that you can use in the book
Right.
from the various people. That's what we'll do. Just make a list for me, and we'll go from there. And that's what you do is you just put them in a list. We've got the list of the ones we've done. We
Mm,
can transcribe the interviews and go with that, and
sounds like
we'll see where the first book goes, and you'll maybe even get some lectures out of it where you'll be running around. People want to
hey,
hear about
I
triangles
mean,
and stuff like
you're not turning me into Preston Dennett yet. Like I'm not
that. Oh
gonna.
yeah, that's the other thing I want to mention. Preston Dennett, you got to set up an interview with Preston Dennett. We talked about the out of body experience, but
Mhm.
he's written 2 books on it.
I
He's
know
got the
I
second
own
book.
his 2 books on it. I have
So
signed Dennett's.
what's that?
I said, I have signed Dennett's. He signed both of his books for me. So
Okay, but we haven't done an interview with him yet. If we want to employ that into another book of all these people have had about out of body
I would
experience.
love that. Yes. And was he not on our out of body experience panel?
Yeah, but he only talked about it for a little bit.
Right. Yeah. He was a
He's
part of
read
the
two
panel.
books.
He does. He needs a full, like you're saying, devoted to his. No, you know me. Anytime you want to talk to Preston, I'm like, let's do it.
Yeah, we should actually have 2 interviews, one with one book and one with the other book, because he gets pretty high numbers. A lot of people like
Oh,
to
yeah.
hear him talk and stuff like that. It'll help him do his book, and we can have something for an out of body experience book where we're going to grab people across the spectrum, not
And
just.
I think we have enough for another panel, actually. I think that with
Okay,
people
we'll set it up, and then we'll.
well, I think if we even invited the same people and just expanded on our first one, just because I don't know, did you go in and read, like, did you get feedback from that one? Because it was so good. I mean, a lot of the feedback I got was touching. They were like, this has been such a deep discussion. Like, you guys are great. Like, I've thought about this so many ways, but I've never heard people discussing it openly. Like, it touched a lot of people. I don't,
I
yeah.
usually don't read the comments, so I'll leave that to you. You can grab the comments and
I
maybe
do
put
and
them.
I don't. I think the phenomenon speaks to me. It's like I know when to read good
Yeah,
ones.
because there may be some others there that have out of body experiences as well. And then we could, so let's grab the transcripts off the ones that we did
Yeah.
and send those to me. I'll put them together. And then you can look at the comments to see if there's anybody else on another panel. Let's do another panel
Mhm.
and we'll go from there. Cause I do think that if you look at we're going to talk to Jim Semivan, this
Yeah.
whole idea of consciousness, the importance of consciousness, and
Mhm.
this whole idea that the abduction thing may be something else. It's
Right.
like where I talked to uh, Chase Williams, where
Mhm.
he's talking about the DMT experience, where
Yeah.
he's in an abduction experience. Well, he wasn't in an abduction experience, and he said it was as real can be. So
Right.
that's one aspect I looked at, the out of body experience thing, is what's really going on here. Is there actually a physical world where this stuff is happening, or is this, as Deepak Chopra said, an activity inside consciousness that
Yeah.
we're it's as real can be. It's on what's the word someone used today? It's a deeper uh hang on, let me get the thing. Hang on, I got to read this to you. Hang on. Because this made sense. I thought I'd remember it because it's so important, but it, it's in a deeper, more comprehensive reality. That what's happening here, it's like the near death experience. You don't die, you go inside yourself. Out of body
Yeah.
experience, you go inside yourself. It's all within you, and it's a more comprehensive reality. It has more levels, it has more complexity and stuff like that. And they're just moving us into these levels of reality. So that's what I'd like to do, a chapter on, is this possible, that out of body experiences, because you have so many abductees who have out of body experiences, and there's this connection between them. And so let's do that. Let's get these transcripts together, and maybe we'll do that, and we'll see where the triangle thing goes, and
Well, and
we'll
it would be interesting to talk to more people like Preston, who, and who's another one that I'm thinking of? Is it Walter, our friend Walter
alter. Yeah,
Rucker, who can astral project, who can go out of body? I don't want to say at will, but maybe it
yeah,
is at will. You know, I'd like to hear more of that side of it, because I know there's the like the accidental kind, and then there's
yeah,
the near
yeah,
death kind, and then there's the people who have practiced this and developed into it. So that could
yeah,
be interesting to compare. You know, the results kind of the same though. It's that heavenly experience. And but Preston sounds like he can manipulate it and
yeah,
go into it, and that's where, you know, that's where the girl from corn country gets her mind blown. You
yeah.
know.
Yeah, he
And
did say it's almost like he's got it down. He said the second book is way more dramatic than the first because he's learned how to do it.
yeah,
And that's important to find out what has he discovered? How does this fit into UFOs? How does it fit into reality? The other one you might want to do, I don't know if you've got a contact with um, Ray Hernandez, but I think the free survey, I'd have to look up the stats because they've sort of moved the stats so you can't find them anymore. But I think it was like 80% of all experiencers claim to have out of body experience. So Ray might be a guy because he understands the consciousness thing, of getting an interview with Ray Hernandez to talk about this
yeah.
whole consciousness and out of body experience thing, and maybe use part of that transcript for the book.
Hmm. You know, I've been looking for a good reason to track down Ray Hernandez for something. I mean, he's come up so much lately and everybody has respect for him, and he dives deep, you know, in some
Yeah.
what people thought were just crazy areas before. They talk about him kind of like how they talk about you, Grant. Like Ray Hernandez, whoa. It's like,
and 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 then you get the connection that I had my download experience February the 26th, 2012. 1 week later, Ray Hernandez had his experience with the dog gets healed.
wow.
A week later, and Chris Bledsoe had his experience with the Shining Lady within days of that. All three happened at the same time.
Wow.
And nobody else thinks that's significant. I think that's significant, Ray. That's significant.
Well,
It's
it's
like
like, I mean,
a week between the two events.
isn't that how like most of these synchronicity things work though? It's like it's significant because you think it is and it drives you to it, and it, you know, it does interweave so much. Like, I don't know, but then there's like the really big ones too. So that's fun. I like that. But you know, the other idea panel slash could make a great book, I think, is this idea where we've been talking about families in ufology, and like
Okay.
what's it mean, you know, for like generational experiencers or trying to raise, you know, your kids and this, you know. And I know like Tiffany Mack said that she would join in on that. I think some other parents that I've talked to would be interesting, but I think that one would be good to like throw out a zinger to like Paul Hynek and be like, hey, why don't you see if your mom would want to join you on this panel with us? Let's talk to Mimi Hynek. Like, you
Is she
know,
still around? Yeah, she's still
I
around.
believe so. Yeah, I think she's still living. So I
Good
think,
idea. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Or I won the one with the kids where you bring your kid on
right.
and Tiffany Mack brings her kid on and you have these kids talking about their experiences and stuff like that. I'm sure there's some people wouldn't want their kid being involved, but
Right, but I
it,
mean, even if it was just us parents talking about our kids and
yeah,
how we discuss ufology with them,
yeah,
like another interesting one is, I thought about asking James Fox, like, how do you produce movies and keep your family out of ufology, when it takes so much of your time? Or are they like embedded in that with you? Like,
yeah. Well, but there is a thing.
I can't leave my son out of it. You know what I mean? It's like I do it so much. It's like I can't, it's like go away. You know what I mean? He knows what I'm doing. Like kids are smarter than you think. So
Yeah. And yet you have the other thing. You have, Nancy Tremaine, whose kids
mhm.
rejected it. Sherry Wild's kids rejected it.
Well, and that's what
Um,
I think it's important to talk about now, how the culture behind
yeah,
ufology is changing to where, you know, hopefully my kid isn't going to think I'm crazy and never talk to me again,
yeah,
like
yeah.
that's
What did Will think about being in the book? Did you show him his photo in the book?
I haven't yet because I don't have a copy of it yet.
Oh, I thought you had a copy. Okay, well, your
So,
copy's coming. It should have been there by now. Usually they're
yep.
pretty fast.
Then remember I told you my I have a crazy postman. It's like
Oh yeah, the song Crazy
sometimes my
Postman.
stuff's not in my mailbox. Sometimes it's just like like thrown towards my house.
Wow. Oh, hopefully, yeah. He's gonna have a hard time. There's a few books in the box, so he's gonna have a hard time throwing it.
I
But
don't know. I found one thing and it was like in three pieces. And it's like you put it in a bag and was like, sorry,
wow,
I left it. I'm like, did he open it? Like, did he
yeah, check out what's in there.
drive over it? Like, I don't what happened, but that was the last thing Dave sent to me. Like half of it was ripped, and I was like, I'm sorry.
Wow,
Bad.
terrible.
No,
Okay, so final thing. What's the name of the book and where can they get it? Amazon.com and your restaurant.
the name of the book is Triangles, Aliens, and Messages by Grant Cameron with Nicole Sackage.
There you go. And
Available.
it was an honor to do it, and hopefully it moves the ball forward. It's a part of history. We've documented, I think, an important part of the UFO story is the triangle thing. Marla did it better than we did. He did a deep dive, but we have a couple that aren't in Marla's book.
Well, and now, he can't say he's got the only book out there on triangles.
Triangle.
So
So,
you can now start a triangle book collection, a Marler and a Cameron.
yeah.
So that
And then we'll have the out of body experience one beside because I mean the book the panel thing does work fairly well. That
mhm,
when you start looking at these things, because you came up with the triangle one, you came up with the art one,
mhm.
and you start looking at these things and you bring the people on the panel, and then people realize, oh, there is this connection. There's this,
Right.
or the
Well,
music.
it's so good to hear from multiple people at once so
Yeah.
they kind of compare and contrast. And, it's a little bit of a feel good thing too, because I know when I first started seeking out other people and talking with experiencers about my own stuff, it was always like, it felt so good to find somebody else that I could relate to. And it's like every panel I have, it's like, I know you're the same way. You watch people, whoever's not talking, you watch the other people and their reactions. It's like you see so many people like when they can share that experience, they're like, oh, me too. Or they're like, yes, 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 on the nose. It's like, that's so much that I take notes on. It's like, oh, well, this person, and, it's making those connections. Like, that's what this is about. So we have a triangle force out there now. I think we
There you
could
go.
call them all anytime we need it. So be like, come
Okay.
on back.
Beautiful. Thanks for doing it, and set up the next panel.
I should.
Usually Saturday or Sunday. You've got the schedule, you've got the job, so just tell me who we're going to put on the panel, and we'll set it up, and we'll go with the next panel.
I'll even make the link. How about that?
There you go. Okay, thanks. We'll leave that at that, and we'll go to the next interview.
All right. Thanks, Grant.
Thank you.